Alright. Merry Christmas, everybody. Today I am going to, before my parents arrive, optimize the notion of blocks in CL-permutation. So, I think I talked about this before in a previous video. I think I talked about the notion of a block. So a block is something in a permutation group, like a Rubik's Cube, that when we apply a permutation, if a permutation is acting on some set, and we apply one of the permutations, a group of points move together or they don't move at all. So, for example, no matter what turn we do, if we look at the corner right here, this corner is going to move as a group. These three stickers are always going to move. So we say that's a block. Likewise, these edge pieces, all of here, each of those are blocks themselves. Because whenever we do any move, those two pieces of this edge move together. So one of the big questions is, how can we detect what the blocks of an arbitrary permutation group are, and how can we kind of sift them out and use them? So I've started to implement code which computes blocks. Let me load this. Let's see. Oh. It's because at the bottom here I have some examples that are need to be so let's do this again. Oops. Okay, and let's load the examples as well. And if I compile, these examples, the first example that I have, which was actually taken from a book, is the group generated from the cycle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the two cycles 2, 6, and 3, 5. The idea is to find a block that contains 1 and 3. So, we have this function compute minimal block, and we can kind of look here. 1 and 3, so when this cycle happens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all points move. So that doesn't really tell us anything. It tells us that all points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 could be a part of a block. But then we look at this 2, 6, and 3, 5. Well, if we apply this, then whenever 3 moves, 5 moves. Whenever 2 moves, 6 moves. So you can almost look at those as parts of blocks themselves. So let's try calling the example. Example. Oops, I need to go on the right package. And package. And we see here that the blocks are 1, 3, 5, and 2, 4, 6, which seems right. Whenever either of these, whenever we apply any permutation, these points move and these points move all together. So more interestingly though, let's look at Rubik's Cube. So we have this example 2. What this does is it'll find a block containing 1, 9 and find a block containing 2, 34. So the question is, what do those points actually represent? If we open up the README with our diagram of the cube and we look at 1, 9, so we see 1 is right here and 9 is right here. So that's part of a corner. So ideally the output of this algorithm would give 1, 9, and 35. because these are part of the same block, but it should also give us the other blocks like 6, 11, 17, 19, 25, 8, and so on. So when I call this, there's quite a bit of output. What we see right here, we have our 1, 9, 35, let's see, 6, 11, 17, where is that? Right here, 6, 11, 17, and so on and so forth. So really, what we've done is extracted the corners of the cube. Likewise, for the edges, if we look for 7 and 18, that's right here, 7, 18, 10, 4, that's right here, and so on. So what we've done is we've extracted all the corners of the cube and all the edges of the cube. Although we have to kind of go through some gymnastics to do it. We have to know that 1 and 9 are part of the same block system. We have to know ahead of time that 2 and 34 are part of the same block system. And I do this example here. What's the minimum block system of 2 and 4? Well, if we go back to our example, where is it? 2 is right here and 4 is right here. Well, these are part of a block system, but not in the usual sense. If we look at the calculation that resulted, we see this big long list right here. 2, 4, 5, 7, and that really is talking about the orbits of this piece. It's not really a useful block, in my opinion. It could be useful, but it's not. I mean, it's a rather large block, and all the other, it's giving basically the orbit of the entire edge system. So I consider that a useless block in a sense, because it's just saying that 2 can move around to any edge of the cube at all. So one of the things we want to do is be able to kind of extract the so-called good block systems, which I call the non-trivial block systems. The idea is to find these and have them, basically, so it can do later computations on it. So let me turn the music down just a little bit. If I can find it. Let's see. Okay, that's a little bit better. So find non-trivial block system. What this does is and there is a more efficient way to do this, I'm sure. First, let's define trivial block system. So a trivial block system is one, let's see, where the length of the block system, so this decomposition here, is either equal to 1 or it's equal to the group degree. So the idea is that an element permutes across the entire set of 1 to the degree of the group, or it doesn't go anywhere, and so all of the blocks are just singular elements. So if it's trivial block system, we're not really interested. So if we have a group, we want to find a non-trivial block system. Here we assume that the group is transitive, meaning it only has one orbit. So we should write that down. Find a non-trivial block system of the group. The group must be transitive or so if the group isn't transitive, then we'll get this situation as down here. It'll think that this block system right here is a non-trivial block system, when really it is, because we haven't divided up the cube into separate orbits. We haven't divided up into the edge orbits and corner orbits. So we want to avoid these. So ideally what we do is we break the cube up into its subdirect factors. So a subdirect factor is a sort of decomposition, maybe I should write it like this, or I can write it on the tablet. That might be a better idea. Let's see, I should have prepared a little bit better. So we go down to our drawing. So, definition of a subdirect factor. So if we have a group, let's see, if we have a group G, and we can decompose it into two, I would say subgroups. There are subgroups, I think. So we decompose into two subgroups, H1 and H2. So H1 is a subgroup of G, and H2 is a subgroup of G. Then we say that H1 and H2 are subdirect factors if H1, the direct product of H1 and H2 is a supergroup or equivalent to G. So, for example, the Rubik's Cube is a good example. We have, let me draw a really horrible Rubik's Cube. The idea is that one kind of subgroup within this cube are the corners. So we can say let H1 equal the corner group. So if we look at since the corners and edges don't overlap at all, we can look at the corners and edges as individual, separate, as just a system in and of itself. H2, consequently, is the edge group. Now, obviously, in the total group, where G here is obviously equal to the cube group, obviously, in the cube group, corners and edges do move simultaneously. So when we do some move, like, for example, if we do the F move on the cube, which is turning the front face, both the corners and edges are moving. However, if we look at the group in terms of just the corners and just the edges, and supposing we apply elements like F to those, we can look at these as separate things. However, that doesn't mean that we can just compute the direct product, H1 times H2, and expect to get the group G. This is false. False. The reason is because there are configurations of this talks about all configurations of the corner group. There are configurations of the corner group that couldn't possibly happen as a configuration in the edge group because of this coupling within the original group G. So the total group that is produced here is actually a supergroup of G, meaning this group is actually bigger than G itself. So what we write is H1 times H2 is greater than, in this case, G. Sometimes you can break up a group into its factors and its product will be equal, but not always. So this is true. So the term here